Hi, I'm Beth and welcome back to my channel. In the last video you saw me read Room on a Broom. If you would like to check that out, I'll leave the link in the description down below. In this video I'll be reading to you Tyranosaurus strip. If you would like to see more videos like this in the future, then make sure you're subscribed down below and you've turned your post notifications on. So let's begin. In a swamp beside a river where the land was thick with veg, lived a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs who roamed the water's edge. And they hooted up with rivers, and they hooted up with reeds, and they hooted up with bellyfuls of juicy water weeds. Now across the rushy river, on a hill the other side, lived a mean Tyrannosaurus with his grim and grisly bride. And they shouted up with hunting, and they shouted up with war, and they shouted up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur. But the two Tyrannosauruses, so grisly, mean and grim, couldn't catch the duck-billed dinosaurs because they couldn't swim. And they muttered down with water, and they muttered down with wet, and they muttered what a shame that bridges aren't invented yet. Now little Compsognathus, but for short we'll call her Comp, found a duck-billed egg and stole it from a nest beside the swamp. And she swam with it and ran with it, and murmured clever me, and won't the baby Comps be thrilled with a duck-billed egg for tea. She dropped the egg in terror, went running for her life, from the mean Tyrannosaurus and his grim and grisly wife. And the duck-billed egg went rolling, and at last it came to rest in all of unlikely places, the Tyrannosaurus nest. Now the mother T had great big jaws and great enormous legs, but her brain was rather little, and she couldn't count her eggs. And she sang, hatch out my terrors, with your scaly little tails, with your spiky little toothies, and your scary little nails. Out hatched babies 1 and 2, as perfect as could be, but Mother T was horrified by baby number 3. And she grumbled he looks weedy, and she grumbled he looks weak, and she grumbled what long arms, and look his mouth is like a beak. He just needs feeding up, said Dad, and gave the babe some meat. The first 2 gulped and guzzled, but the third refused to eat. And he said, I'm really sorry, and he said I simply can't, and he said this meat looks horrible, I'd rather eat a plant. A plant, yelled Mum in horror, and Dad said get a grip. His sisters found a name for him, Tyranosaurus strip. And they shouted up with hunting, and they shouted up with war, and they shouted up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur. Poor Tyrannosaurus Drip tried hard to sing along, but the others yelled, you silly Drip, you've got the words all wrong. For he hooted down with hunting, and he hooted down with war, and he hooted down with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur. Drip's sisters soon grew big enough to hunt with Dad and Mum, and they turned on Drip and told him, you're not fierce enough to come. And he cried, they've gone without me, and he cried alack a day, and he cried, this doesn't feel like home, I'm going to run away. So he ran off to the river, where he saw a lovely sight, a herd of duck-billed dinosaurs all hooting with delight. And they hooted up with rivers, and they hooted up with reeds, and they hooted up with bellyfuls of juicy water weeds. And he stood there on the bank, a sudden urge took hold of him, and he jumped into the water and discovered he could swim. And the duckbills came to greet him by the rushy river's edge, and they hooted nice to see you, and they hooted have some veg. And Drip, who was delighted that they hadn't run away, ate bellyfuls of water weeds, and played with them all day. And he gazed into the river and asked them, who, oh who, is that creature in the water? And they laughed and said, it's you. That night the lightning crackled, and the storm blew down a tree, and it fell across the river, and the trees cried yippee. And they shouted up with hunting, and they shouted up with war, and they shouted up with bellyfuls of duck-billed dinosaur. Drip's sisters stepped onto the bridge, but then began to frown, for there in front of them stood Drip, who yelled, look out, look down. They looked into the water, and they each let out a yelp, and one cried water monsters, and the other one yelled help. Their mother scolded nonsense, and she joined them on the tree. Then she looked into the water and exclaimed, "Good gracious me!" The three of them stood trembling, and Dad said, "Get a grip. You're all of you as drippy as Tyrannosaurus drip." He strode onto the bridge and scoffed, "I bet there's nothing there." Then he looked into the water and he jumped into the air. And how the duckbills hooted when he landed with a crash, and the tree bridge broke, and 4 Tyrannosauruses went splash. And spluttering and clinging to the branches of the tree, they went whooshing down the waterfall and all the way to sea. And the duckbills hooted happily, they hooted hip hip hip, hooray for the heroic one and only duckbill drip. So that was Tyrannosaurus drip. In the next video, I will be reading to you The Dinosaur That Pooped a Planet by Tom Fletcher and Dougie Pointer. If you would like to see this, make sure you subscribe down below and you've got your post notifications turned on. And if you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up down below. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time.